is there a level when you have like some level of notoriety, right, that you also have to be like, you can't just do whatever you want?
Like people come to our house, they've protested at our house. They've come to our house, and that's why I always tell my kids, I'm not trying to be like stranger danger, but like don't answer the door if you don't know the person, because we've had people knock on our door that are just random, like nothing nefarious, thankfully, but they're like, oh, we have a question about something and sorry to bother you at your house. But it happens.
Sorry to bother you at your house. Yeah. I would think that there's an additional layer of security, especially in the current time that we're in, and being in the state that we're in. I won't go too far down that rabbit hole yet, but
that's a whole other session.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much time we have to sit here and talk about that, but yeah, I mean, it's a different landscape, right? Like how do you feel like the landscape has changed since you are we recording already? Okay, cool. So, I mean, how do you feel like the landscape has changed since you decided that you wanted to be in politics, or was that a decision?
Which landscape? The Columbus landscape, the Ohio landscape, the national landscape?
I'll say the national landscape.
I think it's drastically changed. I mean, when I first worked on my first campaign was a guy named Rich Cordray, who was the Ohio Attorney General. That was in 2008. It was a special election when Barack Obama was on the ballot. And obviously Ohio, Barack Obama 2008, who, he won the state, is a lot different than, Donald Trump winning in 2024. I like to hold out hope that Ohio is still center right. Democrats can win in Ohio, although it's tough. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I look back on the time working for Cordray, because it was a special election, and most, the governor, the attorney general, they don't run in the presidential year. They run in the other even years.
Right.
And because he was the only statewide on the ballot, we got to go to everything. When Jay-Z was here, got to go, with
I remember that.
Yeah. I mean, it was incredible. So just like, my first job in politics is like, oh, we're hanging out with the Obamas.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not every campaign's like that.
Right. Well, that was such a hopeful time.
It was.
I think I was on campus at the time. I was a student, and there was a lot of energy, I think, around possibility. And I think people have become a little more cynical, a little more afraid. Our political commercials, our ads and everything have become a lot more weird, and they've always been like adversarial, but
it's like it's personal and visceral. Like tapping into the worst parts of humanity, I think. Strategically designed to do so, to scare people.
Right.
Instead of looking out for the best of humanity. And of course, now with, the Supreme Court letting lies be part of the political process, like there's no one to check whether what you're saying is true or false. And God forbid we have a conversation about AI and how much more complicated that is, of like what you're even watching is true or not.
I know. There really needs to be some additional checks and balances, I think, even for like kids, right? Like how do we teach them how to know what's real and what's not real? Because even sometimes when just AI images come up for me, I'm like, I have to look at them really close. And I can like 99% of the time tell, but there's been a few times where I'm like, oh wow, I didn't, you know what I mean? So definitely something to be a helicopter parent about.
No, for sure. I don't want to sound like, I don't know, an old man or whatever, but I truly do think that a lot of this goes to social media. When you look at kind of there's always been turbulent political times in America. You can't, like, we fought a civil war. There were the 60s, the Depression in the 20s. But when you look at just like the rise of of social media and the interconnectedness, which has a positive aspect to it, but also a significant aspect of just lumping people together based on the algorithms and your likes. And all of a sudden you feel like, well, everyone feels this way, or you get fed information that's not necessarily true. And so it becomes even more partisan and parochial and tribal in the corners that we live in. I mean, there's a reason why social media companies have psychologists on their staff, right? It's all about psychology and clicks and likes and paid ads and dumping information so that it's that brain, like that repeat cycle. And it's ruined politics. And I think it's driven us farther apart. When you look at 2008, really no social media, to 2024, like the biggest to me, the intervention is this whole rise of social media and how social media
and podcasters too.
No, but your podcast is right on point.
I mean, yeah, and I feel like it is, but there's no guardrails, right? Yeah. You can get on a mic and say whatever you want to. And I also feel like I've noticed that just particularly even with the city of Columbus, that everyone now kind of has their own like social media that they're doing. Is one of the reasons for that, I would guess, would be to like inform people about what you're doing, but also just like you kind of have to combat misinformation and disinformation, and you have to use your platforms to do so. Is that, one of the ways that you feel like, or one of the reasons why you feel like that is?
Yeah, I mean, I think that traditional media, your 4, 6s, and 10s, they still have a role to play. But the reality is, with all of the negatives or even positives of social media, people are on social media. They're on Reddit, they're on TikTok, Instagram. And so, how do you connect with them to tell your story, what you think that the truth is of whatever happened or the policies that you're doing? You have to use those mediums in order to connect with people, because that's where people are. Like that's where they get their information. And it's not so much that social media is bad per se. I mean, one of the negativities, besides just the psychology of it and this loop of dividing people, is also like no one does their own personal fact checking anymore. It's like, well, I saw this information, so it must be true because this influencer or a friend that you trust, that they shared it. Like, well, that must be true. And you're like, no, that's not true at all.
Yeah.
And that obviously causes a lot more problems, and not just politics. I mean, I think it's symptomatic in our politics, but that could be in any really aspect of life.
Yeah, it's glaring in our politics, but it's not always the medium. It's how you use the medium.
Yeah.
It's not always the tool. It's what you're doing with it. And, folks are just using social media either in like amazing ways or really bad ways.
Yeah, I'm going to throw my mom under the bus here. I love my mom. But she sent me a tweet the other day, and she's like, "Hey, LeBron's coming back to Cleveland." I'm like, "Mom, where did you see that?" She's like, and it's, sports Cleveland, we love Ohio.com, something random. I was like, dude, like, Mom, LeBron's not coming back to Cleveland. Because I go to ESPN or something, and I think it'd be pretty flashy headlines if LeBron was coming back to Cleveland. I ain't seen LeBron coming back to Cleveland.
I get that would be amazing.
It would be amazing. I'm all about it.
I'm from right outside of Cleveland.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, that's true, right? I get those same kinds of text messages and stuff from my mom. But when you look at voting blocks, that's when things become sticky, because like older folks, they vote in mass, right? And so if they're like on Facebook and they're seeing something and they're like a big voting block, that is when it becomes a problem, right? With people spreading disinformation. But I want to introduce you, because I haven't, told the people who we're talking to today. So, guys, we have Zach Klein. He's our Columbus city attorney, special guest. We're really appreciative to have you on.
I'm grateful to be on. I'm a big fan.
Thank you. That's really nice. I think you do great work. People tell me that all the time, and it's always fun to hear and gratifying to hear. So I appreciate.
Yeah, I love checking out, seeing what people have to say. What they're, you always have good topics, interesting topics. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you. And just happy to have you on. You obviously have a tremendous responsibility in the city, and we want people to know, what your job is, what you're doing, what you hope to do. So we appreciate you coming on and informing people. You mentioned your mom. So let's go back a little bit.
Okay.
I want to talk about where you're from and a little bit about your background. So where were you born? And
I was born in Indiana.
Okay.
So my dad worked for AEP, or at the time, whatever the version of the power company was. It was eventually acquired by AEP. He built power plants for a living. So we moved every 4 years.
Okay.
So born in Indiana. My mom and dad were raised in southeastern Indiana. So that's where my grandparents lived.
Okay.
But eventually found myself, after moving every 4 years, in southeastern Ohio.
Okay.
In a little town called Belpre.
Yeah, I went to OU.
Oh, you went to OU?
Yeah.
So the Gabes. Some people always go to the Gabes, or
across.
So 30 minutes east.
You hit that fork, and you can either go to Belpre or what is it, Pomeroy or Athens.
Yes.
Yep.
The Pay Bridge and the Free Bridge. Yeah. So I went to Belpre High School.
Yeah.
And graduated.
So, but you went to Ohio State, right?
I did. Yes.
Why didn't you go to OU?
Well, actually,
just want to get away
this
from
is
home.
like a little known fact. I actually went to Butler University for a year and a half. So I went from Belpre to Butler because I thought I was going to play basketball at Butler.
Oh, okay.
You're
very tall.
I'm like 6'5". My dad was 6'7". My mom's 6 foot. So,
really?
Yeah.
So you had no choice.
Yeah, I had no choice. My brother's about 6'2", 6'3".
Okay.
But I got a call about being offered a spot to be one of the walk-ons at Butler. And I think they had they invited 4 of us or 5 of us to try out for the team for one spot.
Okay.
And I lasted one practice and realized very quickly that I am not a Division I athlete.
Yeah. Okay.
And by the way, I would preface this, this is before Butler was good. So this was this is not like national
you
championship Butler. No.
Okay.
This was before Butler was good. I couldn't still even make the team. And I was partnered up with a guy that was from Cincinnati.
Okay.
Who was on the team.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure this is true. He got a full ride offer for a linebacker, like Notre Dame and Michigan. So this is a big dude.
Yeah.
But he loved basketball so much that he went to Butler.
Okay.
And he beat the living hell out of me for 2 hours. And what the icing on the cherry on the top, the icing on the cake was after the practice. He was like, let's go in the weight room. And he put on what seemed to be 600 pounds. And he's like, come on, spot me. And I'm like, I don't even think I can properly spot you.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, that was nice of you.
Yeah. Safety first. So I ended up transferring to Ohio State because I didn't play basketball at Butler because I was not a Division I athlete.
Yeah. Okay.
But I ended up refereeing basketball for 20 years.
Really? For 20 years?
Yeah, I refereed.
So is that like something you just stopped doing then?
I did 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I just retired.
Did you just get too busy or
kids, work?
Okay.
Yeah. Refereeing was really good to me. I started in college because I still loved basketball, even though I couldn't really play basketball right at that level. And it's just like one thing led to another about like, hey, you want to make some extra money? You can still be close to the game. You could coach, you could referee. And I was like, refereeing kind of sounds fun.
Yeah.
And so one thing led to another, and I started refereeing Division I, like in the MAC, the Horizon, MAC, Horizon. I got it up to the ACC, the Big East American. I spent a couple years in the NBA minor league, refereed in the NBA summer league, which you turn on ESPN now. You'll see him playing in Las Vegas. So I went out there a couple times in Las Vegas and refereed all the new draft picks.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're a big basketball fan.
I love basketball.
Yeah. Okay. Do your kids play sports at all?
So my son and daughter both play basketball.
Okay. Because are they tall?
My wife's 5'4", so she's killing the average.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Short people
but they're taller.
Yeah.
I would venture to say, if I had a crystal ball, my daughter maybe, I'd say between 5'8" and 5'11".
Okay.
My son will probably be like 6 foot to 6'2" if I had to guess. I mean, who knows? But if I had to guess, fact check me in a couple of years and see how that turned out.
Yeah. So they play basketball too.
They do.
Okay.
My son plays it. My daughter, I coached both of them. My mom and I coached my daughter in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. And then now, like starting in 7th grade, she's going into 7th grade. It's no longer parent coached. It's not preferred.
Yeah.
So we have like an outside person who's the coach. I'm hoping I can still at least be the assistant.
Yeah.
But then I coach with another couple dads, the 4th grade team with my son. We all kind of share responsibilities.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome.
I love it. It's so much fun. Like I said, I love being a dad. It's a lot of fun.
And it's something that's like, I mean, it's high pressure because I'm sure you want to win and the kids want to win, but it's also just like so different than probably like your day to day,
Oh, for sure. It's also bizarre to me, like when you go to youth sports, of how angry the fans get. It's like, dude,
the parents are.
These are like 4th graders.
I haven't gotten to that.
Oh, it's crazy. I was on a call coaching, right? And so like there was a call that they've said all the coaches have to get on this call, and they're like, we had 2 ejections from coaches last game, and I'm like, who's getting ejected at the time from 5th grade girls basketball? Like, what is going on here? Probably again another symptom of what's going on in the world.
Yeah, I think it's just spilling into all areas of society, even youth sports. Because I mean, even when I was growing up, the parents could get a little, but not to the level that they are now. But my daughter, she doesn't play sports. She's like not really interested in sports. She does love the arts.
Oh, that's cool.
So you don't get as much of. Yeah. You probably get more like dance moms type stuff, and not like the parents like yelling in the stands. But so you went from Belpre to Ohio State. Yeah. How was that? Because, I know a little bit about kind of that region. Yeah. It's very different from Columbus.
My wife went to OU, by the way.
Oh, okay. Well, good.
Bobcats.
Great school. Yeah. So the transition, right? Like from there to Columbus, and then talk a little bit about how you went from trying out for Butler basketball to being like, oh, I think politics might be cool.
I was a biochem major,
Okay.
and I thought I was going to be a doctor.
Okay.
And little did I know was how wrong I'd be. I
had a lot of friends who started out pre-med and they were like,
I switched my senior year.
Wow.
To
really?
political science. Mm-hmm.
Really?
And so I think if
you did a lot of hard math for no reason.
Well, I ended up minoring in math because my mom made me, basically. Okay. She's like, you spent 3 years doing biochem. You better show something for it if you're going to not, switch to political science.
Yeah.
So ended up minoring in math.
Okay.
But even when I wrote my college admission, the essays you have to write, I remember saying like, hey, I'm going to be a doctor, but I love public service and maybe someday I'll run for office or want to work in government with my then medical degree in my mind. And so when I switched to political science, it was at a time where I didn't know any friends that were lawyers, no family friends that were lawyers, no family members that were lawyers, but it seemed like a natural fit. It was like, well, I always liked government. I think law school, if I don't really know what I want to do with my life, law school, the degree itself can open up so many doors. And it was like, now that's changed, I think, a little bit, post Great Recession in the 2000s, because law school is really expensive.
Yeah.
So I went to the Barnes & Noble at Lenox and grabbed an LSAT book and took it 3 weeks later.
Really?
And then ended up going to Capitol.
And you did well after studying?
I got into Capitol.
Yeah, that's a good school.
Look, I was very fortunate, and Capitol turned out to be a wonderful law school.
Yeah. Well, that's a pretty cool story to go from, pre-med to law. And so you were making the connection of I want to be in public service. So from going to Capitol, what happened after that?
I clerked for a couple of federal judges.
Okay.
And then I left my clerkship. The clerkships typically are a year or two. That's how long. And then they cycle people through. So I was coming up to the end. I did 2 clerkship rotations at the federal courthouse. And that's when I joined that 2008 campaign with Rich Cordray running for that special election for Attorney General. And that was my first kind of paid foray into politics.
Okay.
And that's when I got a chance to travel the state with him and be on the stage with, behind the scenes with the Obamas and the Clintons and the Bidens and the Jay-Z's of the world, which was really special. And especially a kid from southeastern Ohio to be able to have that experience. And I was planning on going to go work for Rich because he won that special election in 2008 when I got a call out of the blue that Thanksgiving from a friend of mine that I met my senior year in college. I was a John Glenn Fellow, which meant at the time you got to spend a quarter, Ohio State was on quarters at the time, spend it in Washington, D.C. And I met this gentleman who had a really cool background. He worked for Al Gore. And worked at the White House for Vice President Gore. Okay. Well, he called me up and said, hey, I'm going to go work for Biden. I worked for Gore. I'm going to go work for Biden. I get to hire one person. Do you want to come work at the White House?
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, what a great opportunity. Now, my wife, Jenny, she's a shoe buyer for DSW.
Okay.
And so she, busts her butt in her own right, works really hard. And I was like, Jenny, I get this great opportunity to go to Washington, D.C., to work at the White House for President Obama and Vice President Biden. What do you think? And she's like, that's great, but I'm not giving up buying shoes for a living.
I wouldn't give it up either.
So I flew back and forth every weekend for a year.
Nice.
I rented a room in D.C. and took the 6 a.m. flight from Columbus on a Monday and the 10 p.m. flight on Southwest out of BWI.
Yeah.
50 out of the 52 weeks.
Wow, and you did BWI too.
Yeah, because I couldn't afford to fly out of Reagan.
Yeah.
Because part of my job at the office of the vice president, I was essentially, without getting into a lot of details, the chief operations officer. So and the vice president, as you know, spends a lot of time in Delaware, takes the train, like Amtrak Joe. And so I couldn't really book my flight to the week of because I didn't know when he was going back to Delaware.
Yeah.
And so I had to wait for his plans to be set for me to be able to buy my ticket and buy a ticket 2 days in advance. Forget it, you're not flying out of DCA.
Yeah. I know quite a few people that kind of make that commute, and it's not bad, but it's also just feeling like you're living out of a suitcase.
Yes, very much so.
So you were working for Obama and Biden. I have to ask you this because I'm just curious, being that I've gone to school in Athens, kind of understand a little bit about Appalachia and how Athens is like the blue dot in the sea of red. So I would imagine most people from Belpre aren't voting like Democrat, I would guess. So how did you become like, how did your political views go more towards the Democrat when in general people are voting that way in the place that your formative years?
Yeah. So like growing up in Belpre, like my parents, like I won the parent lottery. Like I had the best parents in the world. Like they sacrificed so much for my brother and I, and like really set a too high of a bar of example for me to live up to the expectations that they did for my brother and me. But they really they were active in the sense they voted every cycle, but like we didn't really talk politics. Now, my parents were engaged in the school. Like they were very active at Belpre High School in the athletic association, like working the door for the 50-50 drawing or the half court shot to split the pot.
Yeah. But active in like that part.
That's right. And they sacrificed so much for us in that regard too. So like the idea of giving back, the idea of being involved in your community, the idea of wanting to see better for everybody was instilled on me, but we really didn't talk politics per se. And so, whether I was a Republican or Democrat, like you kind of just go with the herd because you're from southeastern Ohio, to your point. And it was really in undergrad, but also primarily law school. Like, when I got to law school, I'm like, this was to date me. This was 2001 to 2004.
Okay. So
so this is Bush. Like Bush v. Gore was in 2000, right? And so Bush is president at this time. And it's like, I don't really agree with what they're doing. And this is where I'm starting to think more about like government politics. And that's where I said, like, I'm more of a Democrat than I am a Republican. And that's where I kind of gravitated to the Democratic Party and started getting involved. Coleman was mayor, thinking about running for governor. Rich Cordray got in that 2008 campaign. And like in law school, you're busy. You don't have a lot of time to do a lot of stuff other than just study. But that's where I started kind of feeling my way towards the Democratic Party, was just like sitting in a con law class and talking about constitutional rights. So things that you may read about, but here you're studying them, of like, what it means to have the right to privacy, what it means to be able to read in the 14th Amendment, like, Roe v. Wade and important cases that involve contraception and of course the this is way before gay marriage, but understanding the groundwork to Obergefell and those really important constitutional rulings that unfortunately now are under attack.
Right. And that's so interesting that you mentioned that point in time, because the first time I was able to vote was the Bush-Gore election. And I was raised, my family they're Christians, right? But we always voted Democrat. And I just remember having that, like the Roe v. Wade conversation with my mom. And she's like, well, I'm thinking about, I just don't really believe. And I'm like, Mom. And that was when I started to form my own political opinions. And I just, that memory sticks out so deeply in my mind, as I was like, I'm going to make my own opinions about these things.
And I run into people that they're like, I knew my entire life I was a Democrat, or I knew my entire life I was a Republican. And that's great for them. But like, I didn't really know my entire life. It was my own lived experiences and, experiencing what I went through or whatever, like through college and through law school and studying, and I'm making my own independent judgment of what represents and what values, represents me and what values I have.
Absolutely. And that makes sense. I mean, again, I have, I think I've experienced those same things just as I've grown. Like, what do I believe? What do I think? And how have those beliefs changed over time?
And they continue. We all have new lived experiences every day.
Yeah. And when you have new information, you should make a different, a more informed decision. People don't always do that, but that's kind of how I like to live my life. So I want to ask you now about your job.
Okay.
So on this show, we just assume that people know nothing, because the point of it is to educate folks, people who might just be tuning in for the first time, up to people who are like, they love politics. They know everything about politics. So if somebody was to ask you, to put it simply, like what your job is as city attorney, when you just meet someone off the street, like how do you describe your job and like what you do every day?
Yeah. So I have the city attorney's office. It's an independently elected position. That's the lawyer for the city. There's about 175 people that work in the office, half of whom are prosecutors. We do all the prosecution for misdemeanor crime in the city of Columbus. We don't prosecute juveniles. We don't prosecute felonies. That's the county prosecutor. But we do everything from traffic all the way up to something very serious like domestic violence.
Okay.
The other half of my office is like running a big law firm. Like we are the lawyers for, and our clients are the mayor, the city council, the police department, the recreation and parks department, every 9,000 employee in their official capacity. And we do litigation, we do real estate, we do labor and employment, we do claims, we do taxes. We do property action team, which is our nuisance abatement work, where we shut down bad businesses or drug houses in neighborhoods. That comes out of our property action team. And then I started a section when I became city attorney that is proactive litigation. So we're engaged in lawsuit instead of being the defendant, where someone sues the city, like we are the plaintiff, where we sue the state of Ohio over home rule issues primarily, like the regulation of guns and how cities should be able to regulate guns, the regulation of tobacco and how cities should regulate the regulation of pesticides. For example, the state of Ohio wants to say that cities shouldn't be able to regulate pesticides. Well, we are in charge of our own water supply, so we should want to know what people are putting in their pesticides, especially near our water supply sources, to know what's coming into our water and hopefully prevent bad stuff from coming into our water. That's at the state level. And then, of course, we have Trump at the federal level, and we're engaged in litigation there too.
Right.
It's a great office. I'm honestly very fortunate to be the city attorney. I have some really smart people that work for me that could be working in the private sector and probably making a lot of money at a law firm, but they love the city and they want to help people. And I feel very fortunate because we get to make a big difference in people's lives.
And did you start out in kind of the head position, or did you kind of work your way up?
So I was a member of city council.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes,
and then I became city council president.
Right.
And then in 2017, the city attorney before me retired. And so it was an open seat, and I ran in November of 2017 and won. And so I won in 17, I won in 21, and I'm actually on the ballot this November, but I'm unopposed.
Yeah. So talk a little bit. So I was doing some of my research before the show, and I was reading the Dispatch, and one of the articles described you picking fights with Republicans. And I would imagine being in a state like Ohio, where there is a Republican legislature and you are in a Democratic city, like, talk to me a little bit about how you decide the things that you're going to go after in terms of for the citizens of Columbus, right? And how do you make those decisions and go all the way up to, we mentioned the Trump administration. Like, how do you make those calls and those decisions?
Well, the state of Ohio certainly right now has a posture that's in a lot of ways anti-city. My nature is let's work together and solve problems. That's why I got into politics. How do I make a difference in people's lives? How do I help people? How do we work together? And the system is set up to be bipartisan. The system is set up to work together to solve major problems. But unfortunately, the Statehouse has made it very difficult because they keep trying to infringe on what we believe to be home rule, which is like this whole notion that cities can govern themselves. What's best for Belpre, where I grew up, is different than Cleveland, is different than Columbus, and the mayors and city councils and elected officials make the decisions of what's best for them. So it's really like, I wouldn't say that I'm going out and picking a fight anyone, other than I'm standing up for the values that I think we have as the citizens and the people of the city of Columbus, and I represent them. Like my duty to my client, the city of Columbus, is one thing, but my boss are the people of the city of Columbus. And I will always fight to do what's right. And there's certainly plenty of infringement that is going on, like the ability to regulate guns. That's a significant one. The past common sense gun regulation in the city of Columbus in order to make a difference and to save people's lives, like something as simple as safe storage, to require guns to be locked up. I don't know if you saw the video of the little kid that found the gun in the couch cushion and pointed it at his face and nearly blew his head off.
I saw that.
A little bit of common sense goes a long way.
But you've gotten pushback for that.
We've gotten sued by the Ohio Attorney General. We've gotten sued by the NRA type groups, but that's like what my role is to defend the ability to do that, because that's what we believe in as a community.
Right.
And that's like you set your compass at your North Star of like what you always think is the right thing to do. And when you're the executive, sometimes people disagree with you. You get a lot of pushback, and criticism comes with being in elected office, but you always do what you think is right. And that's what we do in the litigations, and that's what I can do as city attorney. I'm not the mayor. I'm not city council. So like my ability with the city of Columbus is, how do I use the authority of my office, in this case, litigation, to go after the state of Ohio or to even sue the Trump administration.
Can you talk about those lawsuits a little bit for people who might not be, well informed on what's happening there?
So this is Trump 2.0. You know, we had a series of lawsuits in Trump 2.1 or 1.0. This is Trump 2.0. And, you know, we have about a half dozen lawsuits that we have sued the city of Columbus and other cities that we've led the charge on against the Trump administration. And I thought maybe we'd talk about this. And like, there's so many of them that I wrote them down because I didn't want to forget.
Get your scroll out.
Well, that we want to know. And my readers. I don't have my readers. But like, look, you know, we're suing a lot of different federal agencies. We have a case that is against HUD and ODOT over the terms and conditions of grants. You know, the city receives, you know, decades old grant funding every year. And now all of a sudden the Trump administration are adding all these terms that aren't even defined, that we think are unconstitutional, we think are illegal. And we push back and we've sued because it's everything ranging from homelessness funding all the way up to paving streets and like including paving, like a real world example, paving streets in Linden and saying like, well, you can't accept this money or sign for it as a city if you engage in illegal DEI. Doesn't define what that even means. Exactly.
What is that
so we pushed back. We've won that. There's the case where COVID-19 funding has gone away. And now everyone may say, well, COVID's over. What the money really is infectious disease money. So the Trump administration said, well, COVID's over, so you don't need this money anymore. It's like, well, actually, we have a significant measles outbreak popping up in the United States right now. And so we actually had to terminate 11 people within the Columbus Department of Public Health that do contract tracing for infectious disease like Mpox, like measles, whose job is to go out and identify the source, contain it so it doesn't spread in their community. They've cut off that funding. So we sued for that. We've got into, this is a crazy one, planting trees in Linden was DEI because it was a predominantly African-American neighborhood. Not to mention that the data track of the city shows that there's a deficiency of trees in Linden. So like, yes.
And it makes the neighborhoods hotter.
It makes it hotter, makes the values of the properties go up. It's healthy for families and for kids. And like, yes, it happens to be a predominantly African-American neighborhood, but the data shows that compared to other parts of the city of Columbus, it lacks trees. It needs to like, race aside, trees need to be planted there. But the Trump administration tried to cut that off. So, you know, we sued there. We sued over our designation as a sanctuary city.
Right.
The administration said that you're a sanctuary city. And like, while we are unabashedly an open and accepting city, we are not a sanctuary city. And there's about $11 million at stake there. And that's money for victims of domestic violence, addiction services, and even counterterrorism money that goes to the Division of Police. So like $11 million total. They're trying to cut that off. And so we've sued the Trump administration there. HHS, we got involved in this in Trump 1.0, where they keep trying to mess with the Affordable Care Act to make it harder for people to sign up for insurance. So we have led the charge to sue them to make it easier to expand the windows so that people can get insurance. And then the final one is this notion that HIPAA, the Trump administration wants to not defend the HIPAA rules for privacy. So they want to make it easier for prosecutors and government officials to look at your medical records to decide whether they want to prosecute you. And we say,
well, why do you think that they would want to get access to people's medical records?
Because they want to prosecute you for abortion.
Exactly.
Yeah, no. And so we're like, hey, like HIPAA is important. So we stepped in to try to defend the HIPAA rules.
And then so it sounds like, are some of those lawsuits just lawsuits that the city of Columbus has, or like most of them you're joining with other cities that are aligned in terms of values and suing kind of on in a group?
Most of them are not just the city. Most of them are like with probably a dozen or less cities, roughly. So there's a national not-for-profit law firm that has gotten together that kind of runs quarterback for all the cities, that does a lot of research, and they co-counsel the cases with us. And that allows us to free up resources. It doesn't charge the taxpayers anything. They get to do a lot of the research and heavy lifting of the filing of the briefs that need to be done. And then we partner with them.
Okay. Okay. So let's like zoom in a little bit more. So I think that that's important for people to understand. But it's also important for people to understand like what's going on in their own neighborhoods and kind of your day to day. And a lot of times when I see you in the news or in the newspaper, it's shutting down like a nuisance property or something like that. Can you talk a little bit about how that functions in your work, how you make the decision to do that? And I would imagine that it's not always the popular decision. You know, you have to answer to a lot of different people, right? And people want different things. So can you talk about kind of how you navigate that as well?
Yeah, and so,
I know that was a long question.
No. So properties come on our radar screen typically because the neighbors are complaining about it. It's a complaint-driven process, which is why it's so important that if you live next to a drug house or live next to a bad business, or you're aware of nuisance activity that you think should be shut down or regulated or taken care of, like, it starts with you in a lot of ways. So we gather this data, and what's special about Franklin County is that they have an environmental court that is unique to Franklin County. Really, no other county in the state of Ohio has it. And they have a judge whose exclusive jurisdiction, their sole job really is to hear these nuisance abatement cases. Mm-hmm. And we are the prosecutors in that court. Okay. So we work with police, we work with community folks, we look at 311 calls for service, 911 calls, overdoses, violence, and we build these cases. Like, that's on the safety side, but there's also the code side, the health side. And so we also look at that. Is the building in disrepair? Is it safe to live in? And like, the combination of those helps us build these nuisance abatement cases. But it does go back to the fact, like, our default, generally speaking, is to work with the property owner. Like, 99 times out of 100, we try to work with the owner to get into compliance, to end the nuisance, to evict the gang members that live there that are shooting up each other. If you find yourself in court, more often than not, it's because you did not return our phone calls, you refused to work with us, we couldn't find a common understanding. But very, very few instances are people, which would people be surprised that they're like, oh my gosh, you're shutting down my business, or you're declaring our property a nuisance. Now, look, the reality is, especially for the larger apartment complexes that are owned by out-of-state landlords, like, we have a housing problem in our community. Yeah. So, like, the last thing I want to do is displace hundreds of people that live in apartment complexes. On the flip side, some of them are the most dangerous places to live. And, like, would you want your family to live there? Mm-hmm. So really, it's holding the out-of-state landlords, holding the bad business owners accountable, but doing it in a way that is thoughtful, pragmatic. It has a common sense component, so that we're not displacing people, but yet at the same time, people have a safe place to raise their family and raise their kids.
Yeah. So in the event that you have to displace people, or you feel like that's the necessary step to take, what are the, safety nets that kind of your office or puts into place, or who do you work with to make sure that people, have somewhere safe, dignified to go to?
So we have an entire apparatus that's been built, and we learned the lesson really from Sawyer Towers. Yeah. That's where Tareya, Ross, and Steve Dunbar, who worked for me, were there on Christmas morning helping people move out because the pipes burst. And we were scrambling at the time to get the right social service providers to find places for people to stay. They ended up coming to Dodge Rec Center to stay for a brief period of time until they got relocated. But it was through that experience that we've now built this kind of apparatus of response. God forbid we find ourselves in another situation that we have people displaced. So it involves the Department of Development and Funding, and it could involve CSB, Community Shelter Board. It could involve the Red Cross. It kind of depends on the unique circumstances of a particular place. But if we know that we're going to have to shut down as a last resort a particular place, I'll get that in motion, get that group in motion, so that people have a seamless transition, as difficult as it is, a seamless transition into some sort of alternative housing, even if it's temporary. That could include hotels. And because of the lessons that we've learned, City Council has passed a code that we're allowed to now bill back those costs to the landlord. So it's like taxpayers aren't going to be on the hook because you were negligently or recklessly dealing with your property, and we had to displace people. Like, if we had to put people in a hotel, we're going to hand you the bill, and we can add it to the judgment that you have to pay it.
Do you have success when you pursue bad landlords and they don't necessarily live in Columbus? Maybe they live in Florida or some other, what's your success rate in terms of getting those people to whether it's recouping costs, getting them to take responsibility, whatever that means? How does that, is that usually successful? I would imagine they're evasive. If you're a bad landlord, I just think you're just... If you are a bad landlord and allowing for people to live in a slum and you make money off of them, you're exploiting them, right?
Absolutely.
So I have pretty low regard for these people.
As you should.
So that's why I assume that they're evasive.
They do try to be. The beauty of it is that you can get a strongly worded letter from the city attorney's office, and that's one thing, or you can get a lawsuit filed by a court of the environmental court that has jurisdiction, and that gets people's attention. Like at some point, then you have you could have a judgment against you, you could have a lien against you, you could have fines against you, and then that attaches to your property. So the nuisance attaches to the property, not necessarily the people per se.
Okay.
So if they ever want to try to sell that property or refinance that property, you can't do it. So we all and what the beauty of our nuisance abatement law is that if they do sell it, let's say we come to terms, that still sticks. The nuisance abatement still sticks until we agree to let it go. So the new owner has to come in with that same nuisance claim on the property. So they can't take advantage. They can't say like, well, shoot, we're going to go sell it to our cousin or our uncle, and then he's going to come in and try to screw over people. It's like, you can do that. You can sell it to them, but the nuisance property designation and all of the rules of the court order are going to follow them. So we can immediately go back to the court and ask for contempt. And that's what we've done a couple of times.
Okay.
We've asked for contempt, which is like more significant fines. And in some instances, in a very rare number, but it has happened, we've actually asked for jail time for some of the worst landlords, the ones that really take advantage of people who have a long history of dereliction.
Yeah.
And has been an important tool as well.
Yeah. So you mentioned like people who have a long history of, exploiting folks who are living in their properties. How do you work with people who may have had like a property passed to them by their grandma or something, and they don't necessarily have the money to keep it up and it becomes a problem in the community? Do you all have mechanisms in place to work with those folks?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, our default is to help people.
Yeah.
And so if there's someone in that situation and they contact us, or maybe they get a letter from the code officer that says, hey, someone in your neighborhood complained about your house. We want to help them get to yes. Like we want to work with them. We want to try to help them solve their problems. As a matter of fact, we started a program for folks that have lived in their home. It's called the Owner Occupied Initiative. So these are for primarily seniors who are economically disadvantaged. You meet certain income requirements. Like you find yourself in court, but you don't have the money to pay it. Like those are the people that we don't want to displace. We want to help those people. So we actually have a court day designated every month where we bring in Habitat for Humanity and other service providers. And you'll sit there and the prosecutor and the judge will say, well, you need a new roof. Who can help them? And, not-for-profit will raise their hand and say, we'll help them. Like, great, sign them up. And so that they'll fix the roof for them, or they'll help them with their siding. Because we want to make sure our seniors, especially who are the most vulnerable, can stay in their homes. Like we don't want to, we're not the bad guys. My office policy is not to be the bad guys. We want to live in great quality neighborhoods, but we want to make sure people can get the help that they need.
Mm-hmm. So how do people how does your office like inform people that these resources are out there? So like if is there people on your team that are kind of embedded? I know there are neighborhood folks that are embedded in the communities, but how do people outside of like going to the website, how do they know that these programs exist that they can take advantage of?
I think this is what government does a bad job of. I remember when I was on city council and we had these community meetings and someone would come, and this is when I was first on council. So this is like in early part of 2011. And they're like, you need to have a program that does X, Y, Z. And I was chairing, say, development that had housing. And I turn over to the development person like, yeah, that's a great idea. And like, well, we do have that. It's like, well, we do a crappy job spreading the word. And I think this is like, it's not just a Columbus specific problem. It's like what programs are out there. The mayor has outreach team. Council has outreach team. I have an outreach person. Our property action team does its own outreach. And like, we just do our best. We have social media channels. We want to advertise. We use podcasts like this because we have a good story to tell, and we do have resources that are available, but we want people to take advantage of them. Right. It's like our Project Taillight, for example. It's a project that we started. This is in response to George Floyd. It was one of the 8 pledges that I made to the community that were like, look, we understand that there are unnecessary traffic stops that are driven by poverty. When, like most people, they that have means, like if their headlight or taillight was out, they'd go to AutoZone and the person there will fix the taillight and it'll cost you $20-$30, but not everyone has $20 or $30. And that can lead to an unnecessary police interaction, one that's, like I said, strictly driven by poverty. So we started called Project Taillight, where we partnered with Columbus State and a couple other auto body shops, where people that, again, meet certain AMI and income, they can get their cars fixed for free. Now that's good for the driver. It's good for other drivers on the road. It's good for the kids in the car. And it doesn't have police, do an unnecessary interaction that more than likely nothing will happen, but God forbid something goes wrong.
Yeah.
That's strictly driven by poverty. And so like, how do you get the word out that exists? And like, we took a lot of time and attention of ramping that up and educating people. And now it's a wildly popular program, but you don't, and we're trying to seek more money from council, and council's been a good partner here because you always need funding for these things.
Right.
But it's about like, how do we spread the word and fund a program that's successful, like a Project Taillight?
Absolutely. And my other question too is just about, supporting the community. You mentioned, creating new programs. Are you getting input from community, right? How these programs should be implemented? Like what's the best thing that would help them? Like what's your mechanisms to doing that?
Yeah, a lot of community events that I either host or I, join, or show up and attend. I love talking to folks and getting input. We like to think we have good ideas at City Hall, but the reality is the best ideas come from the neighborhoods. And like, how do you take those ideas and bring them into fruition? And I pride myself on that, whether that's at churches or whether that's on the street or at a community event or my own personal host at a community event. Is like, what are the needs of the community? What are the problems in Columbus? Because we are very blessed in Columbus. We have a great city, but we're not without our problems too. Mm-hmm. And so how can we like identify those problems and then do big, bold things to tackle them? Like one thing that I can't stand about government is sometimes we just accept the status quo. Like we have to be willing to take risks and do big, bold things and take our city to the next level as it deals with housing, as it deals with education, transportation of people, crime, like all those, like the four really pillars of either going to sink or swim for the city of Columbus over the next 20 years. Like we're going to be really great at those and we're going to take this city to the next level, or we're going to maintain the status quo. And as Mayor Coleman said, like when I was on council, I remember this, the city that stays the same is a city that never grows. Yeah. And like, we can't accept that for the future of our city or for the future of our kids.
I've had a few conversations with people who are on like area commissions, and they're sort of the mouthpiece, right, for the neighborhood. And one thing that I continue to hear is we don't feel like our commissions have teeth. So like we'll make suggestions and we don't feel like we have any mechanisms to really make those things happen. In your capacity, because I know you're not in control of all of that. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that? And what are ways that like you in your capacity, even city council, can make commissions, have more power, not just say that they're there, but really, really have some teeth to be able to move some things that are important to their neighborhoods.
I think that the folks who do the area commission and block watch work are like real jewels of our community, because they sacrifice and spend a lot of time and it's not like for the great pay and travel, right? No. But there are people that care a lot about their area, their neighborhood, and they need to be lifted up and celebrated because they sacrifice.
They do.
The reality is, just from a pure legal standpoint, the area commissions are advisory in nature to city council. And how city council wants to change that would really be up to city council. But they do play an advisory role. And I think they have an important voice that should be leveraged as we try to tackle these major problems facing our community.
But I would imagine that you speak to people on area commissions often just because of the nature of your job. So like, what are you doing just in your personal capacity to, do what you can to make sure that their, suggestions are taken seriously and things like that?
Well, there's two things that come to mind. Going back to the nuisance abatement work, like the citizen complaints, a lot of them are driven by the area commission. Like they know exactly what's going on in their neighborhood. Like 123 Main Street is a problem property for, a whole host of reasons. Like a lot of those area commissioners are some of our best witnesses that show up to court, that may take the witness stand, or when sentences are being handed out, they're the ones saying like, this drug house has caused so much problem in our community. I'm here on behalf of our residents. So they play an important role there. The second is, because we live in a strong mayor city, right? The mayor's the CEO, the mayor controls the pocketbook with the approval of council, of course, but all that money goes to the administration. But we try to pride ourselves in the city attorney's office as a way to cut through bureaucracy. Like if you're not getting a response, if you're not, how can we help you? And a lot of that, the area commissioners like, we've called code 5 times, or like we've called refuse, or like police, or fire, whatever it is. Like we try to be that bridge. And it may not be my direct role as city attorney, but it's my role as a public servant to empower people, to help them get to yes, to help empower them.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked a little bit about unnecessary police interactions, right? And trying to do, you talked about Project Taillight, is that what it's called? I want to talk a little bit about your position on certain things. I want to talk about Marcy's Law. So we know Marcy's Law is a law that was meant to protect victims. Police officers in Columbus, in several instances, have used Marcy's Law to conceal identities if there's been a police-involved shooting. So I want to ask you a little bit about that, because we've talked about values, we've talked about all the things, but what's your position on that and the use of it for, police officers when it was intended for victims? Yeah,
so police officers are exercising their Marcy Law's rights because maybe they've been shot at and that they are by definition a victim of crime. It's not what maybe the traditional definition of when someone thinks of being a victim of crime, say you're being abused by your husband or a significant other. I'm somewhat agnostic on Marcy's Law. And what I mean by that is, and we have argued this case now, it's in front of the Ohio Supreme Court.
Right.
Is that we're just, from my perspective, we're just following the law. And there's nothing that says that if you're shot at as a police officer, that somehow you're exempt from being a victim in the coverage of Marcy's Law. And so we briefed the Ohio Supreme Court as like, you tell us what you want us to do and we're happy to follow it. Because I do think that there is an important public component to this of wanting to know if an officer uses force. What is the history of that officer's use of force? The public has a right to know. Sunshine typically is a good disinfectant to shed the light on the situation. But on the flip side, officers who may have been shot at or may have been hurt, and they are also victims of crime. So we went to the court not necessarily advocating for one side or the other. We went to the court simply saying, here's what Marcy's Law says. Court, you tell us how you want us to apply it as the city attorney's office to our client, the city of Columbus. And it's not just the division of police. It could be a dump truck worker that got punched in the face, and that person could be a victim of crime too.
Yeah.
But you tell us how you want us to apply that, and we'll apply it whatever way you want us to.
Okay. So it feels like when I think about like a law like Marcy's Law, and I think about something like qualified immunity, Marcy's Law, police want to be seen as, a person who's been a victim of a crime. But with qualified immunity, they essentially have kind of a protected status when they commit a crime against a citizen, right? Those things feel in tension for me. And there feels like there's some contradictions there. And I want to ask you about that. Do you ever feel that as well, that there is some tension and some contradictions? And
look,
qualified immunity is obviously, federal. It's all over the country, but
it was created by the United States Supreme Court.
Right.
It's interesting because
but your office had,
I'm
defense,
the lawyer for the Division of Police. It's my job as the city attorney. The charter says that I defend, and like every client deserves to have a full defense of what exists under the law, like qualified immunity. And it kind of goes back to this idea that you zealously represent your client. I'm a lawyer to the bar, and every whether you're a defendant and your public defender is zealously representing you, or you're the lawyer for the police or another department or agency on the one hand, but on the other, like I'm voted by the people, right? And they're people that have an interest in accountability. And that is always, look, I'm being honest with you, it's a struggle that we have sometimes. Like we were going to do what we think is right. And when we look to settle cases, even though the settlement authority rests with the department, in this instance for policing, it's public safety that settles it for the monetary amount. Like we're the lawyers negotiating, but our authority comes from the mayor's office and public safety. There are often times when we can have discussions of like, okay, monetary damages isn't going to make this right. Are there policy changes that we can do that can make the situation better? And so like we always try to look at it holistically of how we can use our role to better society, better the city, better the police department to make them better. That goes beyond monetary damages. Monetary damages are important, but is there a monetary damages plus that we can, creatively think of to improve the situation for future instances?
Yeah, I mean, we know that the George Floyd Accountability and Policing Act obviously did not go where I think a lot of folks hoped that it would. So when you're talking about policy change, like at the city level, like what are some of those policies that you would be thinking about?
Well, the biggest one that comes to the example of through litigation is the permanent injunction that we have with Judge Marbley related to the George Floyd riots / protests. We got sued by several plaintiffs that sued the city for police misconduct, and there was a monetary component to that. But we also negotiated negotiated with the defense counsel or the plaintiff's counsel at the time, these policy changes that are now how CPD handles protests, which I think is more of a national model at the point now, not in 2020, but at the point now of how you deal with protests. You have the dialogue team. You try to cut off traffic, let people take to the streets, let them march. But then you draw your line at individual misconduct that is destructive in nature, or violent in nature. And you go after one-off individuals. You don't go after the entire peaceful crowd. And that was really through negotiation of how you can settle a case monetarily, but how you can also settle the case through policy changes.
That was thank you for that answer. But that was, I would imagine, I mean, I was there, obviously, like I lived in Columbus at that time. That was such I don't even know the word to describe it. You were in elected office at that time. Like what did you learn from that? I feel like that was a watershed moment, obviously for our country, but also for this city, because there had already been lots of protests around police violence in Columbus that had dated back to, I can only go back to, when I was here. So 2013, 2014. So it was sort of, something that had continued to happen and that people had continued to protest about and organize around, not just protest, but organize for change. So I want to know, like, what did you learn from that moment in time?
Well, I think that it was an education and a re-education for some and new for others of just how important policing reform is to the future of this country and to especially marginalized communities, and how we have to continue to strive to get better for everyone who I think wants policing in their neighborhood, but they want good quality policing in their neighborhood. I think it was also a lesson of how important leadership matters. The leadership of the Division of Police, in my opinion, in 2020 failed the rank and file members who were out there every day without any sort of direction on what to do. And so, as Judge Marbley said, in a lot of ways, it was policing run amok because there was no leadership. And it also failed the community for those who were just trying to actively participate and exercise their First Amendment right. That ended up engaging in whether it was pepper spray or got hit by a projectile. And I do think, thankfully, because of the litigation that we've had, we're better off when it comes to policing protesting generally. Now, could something go awry tomorrow? Like, it's the nature of human nature, of course. But I think overall, what we've learned specifically about policing protests, we've gotten right in the city of Columbus outside of the first month or so of 2 weeks of that initial period in May of 2020, June of 2020.
Yeah. You mentioned leadership. So what's your plans? What's next for you? Because I'm going to tell you, I feel like you are running for mayor. You don't have to confirm or deny. I tell people confirm, deny, just don't lie. So you don't have to say anything, but that's what I feel like might be next for you. So that's one. And two, what's your plans? What do you want to do next?
So I'm on the ballot this November for city attorney, and I'm running for city attorney. I've said publicly that being the mayor of this great city would be an awesome job. I have no idea what the current mayor's plans are, and we'll see what happens. I know there are a lot of people that would agree with me that being mayor would be an awesome job. And so from my perspective, it's just like, how do I do the best that I can as city attorney? How do I have a proof of work and a body of work that I can be proud of, so that someday when I'm old and my kids look back on dad's life, that they're proud of the work that I did? And I think if I'm true to myself and I do a good job as city attorney, whatever that opportunity comes, mayor or otherwise, I want to be proud of that case that I put forward, and that people know that I'm fighting for them, that I care about them, that I'm in this business to make a difference, to help them. And I'll want to take advantage of that opportunity if it presents itself. But if it's one thing that I know in life is that you can control what you can control. And I can't control what happens over the next couple of years. I can control now. I can control trying to be a good city attorney, make the best decisions I can. Know that you're executive, you're going to ruffle some people's feathers. I don't do it intentionally. I just do what I think is best. And then we'll see what happens in the future. Yeah.
I mean, I think that that's the one thing that I think I have personally learned about leadership is that people aren't always going to be happy with what you do. You have to make a decision, and you have to stick with that decision. And so I don't envy you with some of the decisions that you felt like you had to make in such a public kind of sphere. And so I would just like to say, like, that's I would like to acknowledge that the job is, I would guess, not easy, and continuing on to do it right, so that the city has some continuity, right? So what would you want people to know, like, ultimately about you, about your job? Like, if we were to end this interview now, like, what would you want people to know?
Well, first of all, I want them to know how thankful I am that they've supported me all these years. I've been on the ballot a couple times, and when you're in elected office, you never can be successful as an elected official if you don't get voted into office. And the people of the city of Columbus have believed in me 4 times that 4 out of 5 times being on the ballot. And I'm just grateful for them, because without their support, I wouldn't be here. I care a lot about this city. I'm a firm believer, bullish about the city's future. We have so many great things going for us, but we're not without our problems. And I believe that Columbus's future is very positive together. And like, we have to work together to do big, bold things in this community. And that's what excites me about the future, is that we can tackle these really monumental problems that if they were easy, they would have been done and finished by now, but we can do it together, and we can do it in a way that I think makes every neighborhood and every citizen proud, and brings along every citizen for the success of Columbus, so that every person feels that success too. And like, I'm just very, very bullish and optimistic about the future. I really am. And I'm grateful for the people of the city of Columbus for believing in me every step of the way. And when I say, it's just giving my very limited role as city attorney, when I say public safety is my number one priority, it really is. And I know people may second guess my decision making, or say you made the wrong call there, but it's never with that. It's never with malice. I always try to look at all the facts in front of me and make the best decision that I possibly can for the city, for its citizens, for the people, and for the future.
How do people learn more about what your office is doing, learn more about you? Where should they go?
Well, they can go on Instagram, like the typical social media channels. We've been pretty active on Reddit. The Reddit Columbus page is pretty active.
Bet you get a lot of opinions on the Reddit Columbus page.
People love anonymity, but it's great conversation. We've done a couple Ask Me Anythings, and you get some interesting questions. We can't answer every question. Like, one comes to mind is, why does God allow suffering? That's a great, maybe ask your priest or your pastor. But we try to engage people in a lot of different forums so they can learn about the office. But if you follow us on all those social media channels, email the office, contact us directly. We want to be as accessible as possible to everyone.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
This has been great.
I thought I'm always like, I was telling someone, I'm always nervous when I interview attorneys, because they can always like wiggle out of the question. Because
I don't feel like I wiggled.
No, I don't feel like you did. But I am always nervous when I interview attorneys, because it's just the nature of, I think, being an attorney. Not necessarily like wiggling out of things, but just being good with words and.
Well, one thing I like about the style is that it's conversational, and I think you let your guard down, and rightfully so. Like, it's just a natural conversation interview.
People let their guard down all the time, for better or for worse.
And that's good. That's what I think what makes the show so popular. You're not rolling through like question 1, question 2. It's just a natural, free-flowing conversation. That's really, I think, kudos to you, right? It's a skill that you have, and probably why your podcast is so popular.
Well, I appreciate that. And, you're invited to come back anytime. We really want to use this show to, I guess one of the things that we're doing is combating misinformation and disinformation. Now, we can't control what people say when they get up here, but the intent is to inform people. And so you're always welcome.
Thank you.
When you
have
something going on. Yeah, that's the point of all this, to be a resource for the community, across the spectrum. So,
well, that's the beauty of having like the candidates on, I think, is that you get to hear both sides. It's their unvarnished opinion of what's going on, and then people can decide for themselves, do I like candidate A or candidate B? But you give them the platform to tell them that.
And we give people the long form. You really get to, I think it's always great. I think this is just me personally. I love to hear about people's backgrounds, where they come from, because I think I think we also just need more compassion. We need to like understand folks more. And I think that's also something that I'm trying to get to, is like, who is this person outside of, their position? Who is this person outside of being a politician? Who's this person outside of being an organizer, right? The person that you see all the time. And so I hope that we're succeeding there, and I appreciate your compliments.
Well, to maybe end where we started, like growing up in southeastern Ohio, but being the city attorney in Columbus, I can say almost unequivocally that there's not much differences between people. I think we spend a lot of time talking about the differences, but there's so much more commonality when it comes to like we want to raise our kids. Good schools, healthy, good job, educate. Like there's not much difference whether you grew up in Belbury, grew up in Columbus, but come hell or high water, when it comes to politics, we try to exploit those differences every single day. But the reality is there's so many similarities and commonalities. And to your point, having the compassion and grace to understand people of like how they grew up, where they're from, what they believe in, and being a listening ear, I think can only make our community better. And that doesn't matter if it's just politics. It's just
It's just making the community better.
Absolutely. It's like civic engagement and compassion to your neighbor. And like that can just go, at the end of the day, if I could do one thing about politics, is just be nice to people.
Yeah.
Just be nice to people. And that goes both ways.
And know your neighbor, especially in this climate.
Yes.
It's just like you don't know what's going to happen every day. And it's like, know the person to the left and the right of you. So, it was really great to have you on. And I appreciate the conversation.
I enjoyed it too. I'm looking forward to the next time.
Thanks.